Welcome to the Mastering Business Skills podcast, where we interview successful small business owners who share their own journey, mastering the skills they needed to grow and be successful in their business. Learn the struggles, the wins, and all the things they learned along the way, so you can cut down on your own learning curve.
Hi, welcome to Mastering Business Skills. Today's guest is Sharon Sobel. Sharon is the owner of Picture This Video, which she started in 1997 to offer video production services to nonprofits and educational organizations. In 2003, she took the business as her full-time venture and included freelance production services for other production companies, where she offered her skills as a production assistant, camera operator, teleprompter operator, field producer, and editor. In 2018, Sharon evolved the business to include video marketing strategy services and social media video production. And now in 2025, she's focused her business lens on live streaming, webcast production, and support to video podcasters. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you, especially with that bio. Podcast is a huge thing now, so.
This is very meta today. It is so meta.
So let's jump in and have you tell us a little bit about what you do, what inspired you to start your business, and kind of your background.
Okay, if I'm getting too windy, I know you can edit. But I will try and tell you. I actually got interested in video production in high school, and people younger than me, that might be a short story. Well, it's a while back. So I was taking a television production class as like a part of the VOTEC program at that time. It was a 2-year program. I'm so old that we were only the second cohort. So anyway, it was really a great program. And before I took that class, I didn't know if I didn't have any interest in television production, but I was like, let me just try this out, see if I like it. And I loved it. So I declared that as my major in college and did the 4 years with that as my major. And this is an interesting point. I went to school in southwestern Virginia, pretty rural area. I only had hands-on experience with my internship at a news station. And what I learned from that news station experience was that I hated news, which is an important thing to learn. So I said, well, I don't want to do news. I have a lot of skills now. I don't know what I want to do with them, but I don't want it to be in a newsroom. So I realized I needed to move to a big city, a big metropolitan area, even though I loved southwestern Virginia and I was there for, 8 months after I graduated, just sending my resume out here, there, and everywhere because the world was my oyster. One day I had this epiphany. Sharon, no one is going to pay to move you for some entry-level job when you have no experience. So once I made that epiphany, I was like, all right, I got to move somewhere. I don't want to be back home, which was in southeastern Virginia. And I had one friend in Northern Virginia from from college. I had one friend in Atlanta, Georgia from high school. Both of those areas actually at the time were very similar for video production opportunities. At that time in the 90s, we had Discovery Channel here. We had BET. BET is still here. Home and Garden Television has an outpost here. There were several cable outlets that did a lot of production. So it was still television production, but it wasn't news. And at the time, Atlanta was basically Ted Turner land. So they had the Weather Channel, CNN, TNT. They had all of these Ted Turner opportunities there. So I decided to move to Northern Virginia because my family was still in Virginia and I would rather drive 3.5 hours to see them than 10.5 hours to see them. And so my first real job outside of college, when I got past the waitressing stage, because we know I did that, was at a cable station. and it was they had what they call a local origination department. So we did all kinds of programs for the city. I was working at the cable company for Alexandria, Virginia. So it was a great, great experience as a first entry-level job. I did sports, we did parades, we did concerts, we did studio shows. I was really able to fine-tune a lot of my skills and have different experiences, all for one really low hourly rate of $6.25 an hour. So I definitely was there for the experience and not the money. But I did get a lot of great experience. And over the next, I guess it was about 5 or 6 years, I moved from there. They got bought by another cable company that dissolved our entire department. And I moved all of that work experience to the Fairfax County schools, actually. So I had come in there. I didn't have a ton of experience, so I really thought I'd be coming in at a pretty low level. But they brought me in as an associate producer, which was very kind, very welcome. And I continued to be able to shoot and write and edit and start making other kinds of productions from start to finish. I loved Fairfax County Public Schools and the work that we did. It was really varied. It was all very positive. Everybody was happy when you did anything for them. They were really happy clients, which goes a long way. Yes. I think anyone in any business can appreciate that. And I just felt, though, this is nice, but I'm still pretty young and I have a whole career ahead of me. And I don't know that I want to spend my whole career here. I had joined Women in Film and Video back in 1997, which I'm still a member of today. But it exposed me to this whole other world of people and what they were doing. They were doing documentaries. They were doing stuff for Home and Garden TV and for BET and Discovery. And I was like, I want to do that too, but I can't do that while I'm working for the school system. So I was planting my seeds on how I was going to move to that world. I started Picture This Video in 1997, but it was a part-time venture because I still had my job with the schools. That was kind of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And I was taking on personal video projects for people on the weekends and evenings. So it was, it was the weddings and the bar mitzvahs and the things like that, which was fine. I really wanted to just kind of dip my toe in being a business owner, but still have a nice steady paycheck in the meantime. Yeah. And that was a good plan. That worked. And I was finally ready to make the move away from that work. And I was given an opportunity to make a strategic move. And this is kind of key, because one of the things that held me back from taking the business any further than it had been at the time was my self-realization that I had never taken a business class in college. And this is a business first and foremost. And the video production skills are great, but you have to know how to run a business as well if that's going to be a source of income and not just a hobby. So I was given this opportunity to work as a office/production manager for a busy small production company in Alexandria. That role was coming open, and my friend knew about it, and she was like, well, they might hire you, Sharon. I said, well, I don't have any experience in any of that. And she said, well, they're willing to train on the job. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that would be good.
Changes it.
That sounds good. And I learned pretty quickly after I came on why they were willing to train on the job. And that was because they'd been in business a long time. The boss had some very set ways that he wanted things done. So it was actually good if he brought someone in who had no ideas previously of how things should be done. I don't need your opinions. Just do it this way. Right.
Yep. No bad habits to break. And yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, well, okay, I don't know any better. I will do it your way. And so I was there for a little over a year. It was a hard year. The work was challenging. I learned some things about how not to run a business as well while I was there. Also valuable.
Yes.
But one of the most important things that I took away from that was one of my tasks was when invoices came in from freelancers, I was the person who processed those to make sure they got paid. And I was the person who made decisions on when we could pay them and how to do that. So I was the in-house liaison for the freelancers, whether they were getting hired, what work was coming down the pike, what was the status of their invoices, etc. And one of the other, so that was important because I was seeing what they were charging for specific things. And I've mentioned how I have a lot of different skills. When I was looking to freelance, I wasn't set in on one specific thing. I knew what I couldn't do, but I was still working on all the things that I could do and was willing to, hang a shingle up for that. But I did not know what to charge for that until I had that job. And I was like, oh, so you charge like $1,000 a day for camera. Oh, okay. But I knew this camera guy also had 25 years experience, and he also had some really high end gear. So he would charge $1,000, but then I would have another camera guy who would only charge $700 for the day. So I at least had ranges of what that looked like and how to make an invoice as a freelancer. It feels like something you might take for granted, but as a person who's hired freelancers myself now, I realize a lot of times I have to teach the freelancers how to write an invoice. They don't know how. So anyway, I used that experience to really set the groundwork for how I wanted my business to evolve. Some rules that I wanted to set in stone. One was do not put all your eggs in the government subcontracting basket.
Yeah.
That was a big thing at that production company. That was 90% of their work.
Oh, wow.
In this particular environment here in 2025, you would be in big trouble if that's your business. Yeah. And there are production companies that are in that place right now that are feeling some pain. So I'm feeling pain too, but not because of that. I didn't do that part. But anyway, I felt like I had learned enough from that job after a year, and I got married. And I was like, you know what? I think this is it. We came back from our honeymoon, and I was dreading having to go back to that job. I really was. And, I had to be fair. I had another breadwinner now who was in the house with me, and I didn't want to take advantage of that. So what I did, I'm a very fair person, probably to a fault, but I said, hey, look, I've added up all of my liabilities to you, my financial liabilities, and what it costs now for me to be in this house. I'm paying my own student loans, I'm paying for my car, etc. But what cost do I incur now? And I want to make a deal. I want to try and be self-employed person. And if I don't make that number for 2 months in a row, I'm going to go back and work for the man or the woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my new husband agreed to that. He knew I was ambitious and this was a good motivator. And I've never had to go back and work for the man or woman. It's not always been awesome. I can be fair about that. It's been a struggle at times. It's a struggle now. But I have built some good skills in learning how to pivot the business and what to build on so that I can, keep the lights on here and still have an office. I don't have employees. That probably helps too.
Yes. I know that's my team is all 1099. So yeah, it definitely helps because there's that, difference when you have employees of how much more you have to invest in the company too.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a small company, it's a lot.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And so you have a lot of skill sets that you've developed over the years, and you've been fortunate enough to have those positions that you could learn from. Is there any skill looking back that you wish you had learned sooner, whether it's along your career journey or just in starting your business and the business skills that you had to learn just to kind of get everything going and make it successful?
Yeah, and I think I'm still in that place, to be honest. And it's not the video stuff. It's I can learn the video stuff. Um, I basically had to pare that down because I had too much stuff going on in my head, too many skills going on, and
Yeah.
you don't want to be. I was a multifaceted maven for a long time. I called myself that, but then there's also the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none,"
Yeah.
and I did not want to be that either. So. The video skills, I got that at the place that I wanted at this point. But what I have always struggled with in the business skill side would be pricing. That is
Mhm.
the hardest for me. And I still am working on that. Um, Even though I had like a leg up when I had that job and could see the freelancing
Right.
invoices, those are freelancing invoices. They are not a complete comprehensive project. And
Yeah.
knowing like, how do I mark that up? What's fair to mark up? How do I budget? Um, what do I charge something different to Aaron than who runs a business than I do to Joseph who runs a production company, because I know he's marking me up. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
nuances with all that I am still working on. And even today, with the services that I've pared myself down to, those weren't even in existence back in
Yeah.
2002 when I had that job. So um, there's a lot of, until there's some guessing and some
Yeah.
testing. Will they pay this? Will they pay that? Am I undercharging? A lot of times I'm told that I am, which is not good. So I'm trying to fix that. But then I have to also press back on some people and say, no, 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 no. I understand that you think I should be charging this, but I know for a fact that other folks at my same level are charging around this. This is the right range.
Yeah.
Um, I was talking to a podcaster, not as a guest, but he has a podcast, but he has a business. So I was talking to him about the editing stuff that I have, those editing
Mhm.
skills that I'm bringing to the table, and I said, well, I would be charging this amount, and he was like, oh, Sharon, that's too low. I pay my editor XXX. And I was like, well, maybe you're overcharged. Maybe you're being overcharged.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm not undercharging. Maybe you're paying too much.
Yeah.
So, but I say that with a question because I don't know for sure.
Yeah. I feel like all pricing it's kind of a just trial and error. I mean, when I started, I was way undercharging myself, or I'd like
Mm-hmm.
give discounts before they were
People
asked
even
for it,
ask.
all of that. And like I learned over the years on that. And then even when I started doing, white labeling stuff for other companies, I would give, my pricing at the time, and then they would double it and these people would still pay. So I was like, let me just experiment something here. So then I
Right.
started doubling what I had originally as my price, and
Right.
they were still doubling it and they were still paying. And I was like, this is crazy. So
Mm-hmm.
knowing that, I was like, well, now I know what I could actually get. Like, because I'm still under what everybody else was coming in at. So, but yeah, and you have those special cases where you do things differently or you do project rates or whatever. But yeah, I feel like it just evolves all the time with your skill sets and even the economy and what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And it's different when you are new at something and you don't really have the experience to be able to charge a higher amount, right? So me doing this work compared with someone who's been doing it for 10 more years, I can't charge the same as them. So I can't set myself at that same level on the yardstick.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I always tell too when I'm training new virtual assistants and stuff. It's if you're brand new to this, you can't charge what somebody who's been doing it 20, 30 years is charging. You
Right.
need to work your way up. But I also then tell them, this is how you do that. And this is how you gain the skills. And this is how you increase your pricing with your existing clients. So you're not losing clients. You're just increasing as time as your skills increase. Because that's what we all do, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I had an accountant one time. One time. Not that I don't have an accountant now, but
Right.
I don't have the same accountant. She was raising her prices 20% year after year.
Oh, wow.
That adds up for an accountant. So
Oh, yeah.
I ended up cutting my relationship there, and then it took me 3 years to pay her bills. Because it had gotten so high. I was like, well, I can't do this anymore. You would not expect that of all of the things that you could go in debt for, the accounting.
Yeah.
Right? I should be dumping all that money into camera gear and equipment for my business, not putting all of it towards an accountant's bill.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I'm not doing really fancy stuff here. I'm running a small business, and it is small. And, my husband had some complexities with his work at the time, but she wasn't telling us she was raising it 20% every year. And I was like, this seems higher. And then I'd look at past bills. I was like, oh my God, this is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's always key, especially when you're raising prices, to give them that leeway of, hey, in a couple of months is going to be going up to this amount, not just surprise, here's your bill.
Right. Right. That's too much. People can handle, a couple percent increase year after year, I think.
Yeah.
When it's in line with cost of living increases, it's hard to argue that. But that's practically like a markup percentage, right? Why are you marking it up anyway? I know you're doing the work.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the support you provide, especially for podcasters, because I believe you support them, if I have this right, in leveling up or even monetizing their podcasts. And I would love to hear more about that, because there's so many of us doing podcasts that.
My goal is to take podcasters that are doing an audio only podcast, or maybe they're using Zoom or a lower level of video, and making the end result look and sound better and be more engaging to the audience, hopefully. And so I don't use Zoom for that service. I have a different virtual studio platform that I use, and I build out a branded set look so that we can put graphics up, we can put calls to action, remind people to subscribe because they'll likely be watching it on YouTube, and put links in. We can, if it's a live event, we can even do polls. So there's a higher production quality level that I can bring to them and their podcast, and that's the part that the audience sees, right? The part that I'm building out, and I hope so. My goal is to have these other services for podcasters. They're more on the business side of things, ready by the end of the year, but at worst a year out, because I want to have some test cases and folks that are ready to work with me on a low risk setup. But I want to help podcasters get more visibility. There are so many podcasts out there, and there's a lot of bad ones, And a lot of times it comes down to the podcasters not being able to really get serious about their production schedule, about lining up guests, having content. Those are things that they have to commit to first.
Yes.
Because your viewers and your listeners need to have regular content from you, not just when you feel like it or come up with a good idea, right?
Yes.
So a lot of podcasters will say, well, I want to wait until I have 10 produced before I actually launch this. And I think that's a really good rule, to have some in the can before you actually go live. But then once the podcast has been given love over the course of some time, maybe a year or so, and data is being kept, that data can be used to get sponsors. And let me give you my very best example, which is actually my husband. He is the best example. He is a podcaster. That is his full-time job. That is how we pay our mortgage. And he built that himself. So he is my partner that works with podcasters on how did you do it? How did you get your podcast from 0.0 to over 1 million views, over 20,000 subscribers in 3 years? How did you do that? And first of all, it was full time for him, right? He was putting a lot of time into the content. He podcasts every single day.
Oh, wow.
Which is not a requirement of other people, but that's how it becomes a full-time job.
Yes.
If you're making a podcast every single day, that's how it becomes a full-time job. He could certainly pull it back if he wanted, but it wouldn't work for his format because his is more of a news format.
Okay.
The other thing is because his content is about IT, and is specifically for folks who are providing IT services to small and medium-sized businesses. Those people, prior to podcast time, those people were all going to conferences to network and meet vendors. And Dave started his podcast the September of 2019. So he starts his podcast September of 2019. He's working on it. He has it up and running pretty quickly. And then in March 2020, all of those vendors who had been going to conferences and all of the attendees who had been going to the conferences to meet those vendors, that all disappears. But the budgets were still set. There were still marketing budgets. Right? So Dave says, hey, I know you have nowhere to spend that money. I will take your money. We can make commercials. We can do advertising on my podcast. And by the way, I've been tracking my data. I can tell you without any data that all of my listeners are the people that were going to your conferences. Right? Yeah. So this is not the people that are making beer for a living. These are the people that are using your services. So how else are you going to connect with these folks? What are you going to do? You put all of your marketing dollars into those conferences. Try this out. See how it works for you. It worked out, right? And thankfully, I can say that we're beyond the pandemic, but Dave has still been able to grow the podcast. He doesn't travel to those conferences anymore. He spent a lot of time on the road doing that sort of stuff in his job before he went self-employed. But folks were kind of alerted to this new marketing vehicle, which wasn't crazy expensive for them when they look at how much it costs to go to conferences. It was completely targeted. Every single person that listens to Dave's podcast is interested in what he has to say, and what those vendors have to sell. He doesn't have Coca-Cola advertising on his podcast. But he's had Cisco advertising on his podcast. And so he's got sponsorship packages right there on his website. He has folks just signing up for advertising without a single conversation, which is a great place to be. And so, part of the success for a podcaster would be to make sure that they're keeping track of the listenership, what's working, what's not, changing things up. Changing up the promotion of the podcast is very big as well. Making sure you are doing promotion of the podcast that cuts through all the noise out there. And then using all of that data that you're getting from your viewers. Where are they? what are the demographics of them? When are they listening? There's a lot of information that's out there. I'm not into that part. But Dave can do it.
Yeah.
And so, we have only half jokingly said that we can easily see ourselves merging our businesses. They're two separate businesses right now.
Mhm.
We could easily see ourselves merging our businesses in the next 5 years and calling it Picture This Radio.
Yeah.
And that part of the business would be specifically to support podcasters. His business is called MSP Radio. My business is Picture This Video. And I like the idea of Picture This Radio because it really plays to that idea of making a video podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I feel like we just, and we did the same thing. We launched in the end of May, and we did the same thing. We had, 30 people lined up for interviews before we even launched. And we had, when we launched, we ended up, we had a schedule all the way into August at that point. So,
Good.
so we were like, okay, we do not do daily at all.
Right.
But we do weekly. So
Yeah.
what do you think about, I recently had a conversation with somebody who was looking that they were thinking a monthly podcast, like just a small clip. Do you feel the same? Like, is it the same concepts, no matter how they're, I guess, structuring their releases? Or
I would say consistency is more important than quantity. So if you're only going to do it once a month, that's okay. Dave actually has another podcast that he's a co-host of, that he doesn't run it, but he's a co-host.
Right.
And they were podcasting once a week, him and two other guys.
Mhm.
They were podcasting once a week during the pandemic. And then they got to episode 200 and they said, you know what? This is a place we're going to take a break from this for a bit and we'll just come back when we want. And so now it feels a bit more sporadic and I'm subscribed to it. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, they made an episode, right? But it's certainly not as regular as it was.
Right.
It feels like it's closer to once a month. But I think, just in the podcast itself, if you're saying, hey, we'll see you next week, or we'll see it, we'll see, there's a podcast I listen to, we'll see you in our ears next month, whatever it is. So just giving people an expectation of when it's going to come out, or, if you want to catch up on past episodes, make sure you look at our YouTube channel. We've got things there. And the YouTube channel, if you're doing the video podcast, it's really key to keep that organized so that folks can look at things. I like to suggest that depending on the content, you might want to categorize into playlist by subject, right? So if you're a real estate agent and you're doing podcasting, you might have one playlist for buyers, one playlist for sellers, and then another one for, these are shorts that we did about the current state of the market, a YouTube short in between, so that it's very easy for people to come to the YouTube channel and listen to the content that they're looking for without seeing episodes that say episode number 211, January 22nd, 2025. What is that? That's not going to draw me in. You get episode 225, how to stage your house properly to make a successful sale. Whatever it is, it needs to have something to draw them in. So the YouTube channel is part of that business side of making sure that everything is getting the love that it needs so that it gets the viewers and the listeners that you're looking for. It all kind of plays together.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you could give one piece of advice, or a couple of things, if there's more than one piece, to someone starting out a business that's maybe looking to make that change like you did, that's going from working with the companies to working for yourself, what would that be?
Look for as many educational resources that are free as you can find. And that is what I did. I found some really great helps with the Small Business Development Center where I was living. They would do monthly lunch and learns where we would study business topics and talk about it with other business owners. Well, how do you handle a bad review?
Yeah.
Right? Things like that. Stuff you're not going to learn how to handle a bad review
Yes.
in college business school, will you? But
Yeah.
those sorts of things are super important. What do you do about a client that's bad at communication? Do you switch, or do you tell them to switch to the way that you want it? Okay. These are things that are really important to talk about, and to have this cohort of other business folks that are in various stages of their business. You probably have some people that are very new
Yeah.
businesses, and then you have others that have had their business for 30, 40 years. It really provides a good value. And the Chamber of Commerce's, the Small Business Development Centers, the Small Business Administration, SCORE, there's a ton of entities out there that are all willing to help business owners, and they have a lot of great free resources. I think there's one I've been using quite a bit the past year. I think it's the SBA, the Virginia SBA. So because I'm in Virginia, each state has their own little small business administration, and they put on webinars and trainings all the time. Sometimes there's a cost to them, sometimes there's not, but they always state that up front, and they happen typically during the business day. So it might be, a 9 a.m. or 12 p.m. or whatever. But because it's statewide, those are always electronic. But the counties and cities will also have trainings as well. So you can simply Google, doing small business in fill in the blank, your city or state, and you will find resources. And I think people should take advantage of that stuff as much as they can, because it's better than going back to college. Nobody can afford that. You're trying to run a business.
Yeah, definitely. I know when I went to college, it was for a totally different major than what I actually ended up doing.
Yeah.
And, at the time, I think a lot of us, like over the years, I've heard so many people say, well, I went to college for this because it just, it sounded good and I needed to pick something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I picked that, and then I realized that I just didn't like doing that. And I, went back to college, or I did this, or,
Right.
and, I feel like so many times I want to say to some of the seniors in high school, like, you don't have to jump into college, take your time, like, decide what you want to do, take a year off if you need to, make sure you're, before you invest all of that money to then turn around and be like, it's not what I want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think anytime you can, get experiences that are low cost, no cost, and are very practical to
Yes.
where you are in your life, I totally take advantage of those. And, I want to just say, I came full circle with my career experience. When I moved up to the Northern Virginia area, I ended up getting connected with the local public access station. And it wasn't for work, right? They don't pay, it's for volunteers. Yeah. But, here I had a degree, I had a lot of enthusiasm and some skills, but nowhere to use them because I was waiting tables, and they don't need that at a restaurant. So, I started volunteering at the public access station. I put the experience on my resume as I was continuing to send it out, but I had moved up here at this point. And the very first, that first job that I had, when they interviewed me and called me back and said, you're hired, they said, if you hadn't put that public access experience on your resume, we probably never would have called you.
Mm-hmm.
And I make sure I tell people that there are ways, it's not lying, but to make sure that you are looking at all of your experiences and how does that experience fit in with the skill set that might be needed at the job that you want.
Yes.
I think women are more in tune with this than others, in part because if they have decided to have children and take a few years off,
yes,
and then they return to the workforce, they're like, well, gosh, what am I going to put on my resume for the past 6 years? Well, you were leading projects with the PTA. You were managing a household budget. Those things that you were doing in your life probably pertain at some level or another with what you might be asked to do at your next job. So I think it's really important to put that stuff in.
Yeah, or even have different resumes for what you're doing, especially when you have multiple skill sets. I know at times in the past I would have, one resume that had my writing experience on it and another resume that had, admin type of experience and things like that, because they don't always go hand in hand, but
oh yeah, that's true. I mean, we could do a whole other conversation about resume writing, but I had two resumes as well. I have a technical resume, which is basically for freelance work when they want me to come in and operate one piece of equipment for the full day. And then I have another one, which is more the breadth of my clients and work. And there's just like there's a list of the equipment that I can use and the skills that I have. And that's up at the top half of the resume. Because sometimes that's all they want to know. Do you know how to operate this piece of equipment? Do you know how to operate a teleprompter? What are the software programs you have? Like, if that's not listed in the top half, they're probably going to say, I don't really care about this job over here where she did remote directing. I really don't care.
Yeah.
And you do yourself a disservice if you don't put yourself in the mind of the person that's looking at that resume. What do they actually want to see? I know, only because I've had to do it. They want to know, what are your skills and what gear are you familiar with? So just get that out and done, and then move on with the fluffy stuff that you want to brag about.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it helps too to ask somebody who knows you really well, or somebody who's, especially if you have taken that gap in work length of time, to ask somebody, how would you, look at my last 7 years and tell me, like, what would you put on a resume, especially if they're a business owner or something, because they'll take that, experience that you've had with your kids or caring for your parents or whatever it is, and turn that into, you organize things really well. You work well under pressure, like all of those types of things that you wouldn't necessarily think of you're on your own to put in there, because you're so focused on, well, I was my elderly parents' caregiver, or I was raising my children, or whatever it is. So
yeah, and I mean, that's the whole reason they have functional resumes and chronological resumes, just for that sort of thing. There's a lot of folks now in 2025 that have paid no attention to their resume whatsoever and are really feeling lost right now because, number one, the last time they wrote a resume, there were not AI tools searching for specific words in that resume to even get you to the next level. They have no idea about that. And then they never thought they'd need a resume again, right?
Yeah.
So it's a hard place for those folks. And I'm pretty well networked with resources for job searchers. I like to say I'm perpetually underemployed. So I have my ear to the ground, keeping an eye and an ear out for what kinds of job search opportunities are out there, and where folks are needed. So as I come across, resume writing seminars and things like that, I'm sending those to my federal employee friends that are now in that boat with, 40,000 other people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm almost wrapped up. So to end this, let's talk about what's next for your business, and what are you excited about? What plans do you have for the coming 6 months, year, 5 years, whatever?
Yeah. Okay. So I talked about that a little bit when I was talking about where I was growing the video podcast side of the business, and trying to help folks more on the business side of that, as well as supporting them with behind the scenes video editing and production work that relies on my video skill set. But as far as the live streaming portion, which we haven't talked too much about, the live streaming, I am gradually growing that business as projects come up. So this is like a new business practically for me, where I am talking to a different level and group of clients than I had been for the past 17 years or more.
Mhm.
And so I'm identifying where those people are. First of all, that's what I'm in right now, is finding the right folks to get my messaging out to that do live stream work, like want live stream work done. I've got to find those people. And then as I pick up the projects, what I'm really doing is kind of making this cookbook of how to do each different kind of challenge. So one job might need a hybrid environment where they have folks calling in and it needs to be on a screen, etc. Another client may not, and they want to stream it to Zoom. So that's kind of a wrapper for what I'm doing, if that's the case. So just writing down exact instructions and equipment lists for each kind of scenario, so that as the business grows, I can identify this kind of project needs page number 62 in my cookbook, and I can turn to page 62, know exactly what equipment I need to take out, and the test that I need to do and the support that's needed. So that's what I'm kind of building now, is those processes as well as the client list. So I'm open for clients.
Yes. Hey. Well, I feel like once people hear the podcast too and know how much you can help, I'm hoping that you'll get lots of calls or emails or all that.
That'd be great.
Yeah, because we're definitely going to put how to contact you and your LinkedIn and all of that in the show notes. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today. And
of course.
Yeah, and we hope to have all of our listeners tune in again next time. And we appreciate you. Thank you.